Ex-Trump supporters, what made you change your mind? Took a little longer than it should have, but January 6th and his handling of it. His crying about election fraud and ramping people up with dangerous conspiracy theories just because his ego couldn't handle the fact that he lost made me start to realize that he wasn't the courageous man of family values that I had been told he was by my parents and others in my small town. I was freshly 18 for the 2016 election and barely a year removed from my hometown of 1000, so I didn't know any better. Never a Trump supporter, but I was a registered Republican until 2020. I was a college freshman English instructor once upon a time. One of my favorite bits I taught was a section on propaganda techniques, where we reviewed the sort of logical fallacies employed by marketers, politicians, propagandists, and bad faith actors, mainly to help my students avoid making them in their term papers. Trump was an absolute fucking geyser of every single logical fallacy and propaganda technique in the book. There's no shortage of that dumb fuckery in politics, but I'd never seen so much of it so unapologetically from one single person. And I'd never seen a movement so willing to gobble it all up. It really caused me to rethink my entire political philosophy. My dad came to me soon after the insurrection. He was embarrassed to tell me that he voted for Trump in 2016, but swore he never would again. Said there are too many similarities between him and Hitler. It is so fucking refreshing to read a whole bunch of people who sympathize with traditionally conservative ideas but who have also retained and are using their critical thinking skills. I promise if the left ever flirts with an anti-American dictator candidate, I'll return the favor. Not accepting the electoral results. I don't like a sore loser. Plus, he was so obvious that any election he lost had to be stolen. He was saying that about Republican primaries, let alone Democratic scheming. Anyway, it was perfectly okay that in a Dem administration he could win the election, but somehow, when he controlled the reins of government, the Dems could fix the election. Man. I can smell bulls hit a mile off. Now, most of his sycophants have lost faith in the election process, all for that bum. I was thinking the other day that if someone called him on milking his supporters dry when he's supposedly worth billions, he'd probably just answer, well, who else am I going to con? No regrets or conscience. I got divorced and realized that my ex-wife was a legitimate narcissist. As I learned about cluster B personality disorders and narcissism, I realized that all of the tactics they use is exactly what Trump does. At the time, I was in high school surrounded by people who watched exclusively Fox News. Suffice it to say, I thought myself a very educated young Republican. The grab em by the pussy quote was what got me, at least when I realized he wasn't kidding. It horrified me to hear all the excuses good people I loved made for that line. As I continued to watch the Republican debates, it became clear that he had no idea what he would actually do if he got the presidency. He wanted some things but was incapable of verbalizing how, and so many people in my life fell for it. I went from laughing about the distant possibility of Trump winning to gritting my teeth as it started to become a reality. Was more right-leaning until the past couple of years when I got sick of feeling aligned with all of the conspiracy theorists and hate-mongers. I just want people to be happy and have the best shot at a decent life, and that's not what the right promotes. My boomer dad and his friends voted blue the last 2 election cycles because of January 6th and the crazy Republican obstruction in Congress. They will vote blue again this coming election. My dad is a die-hard Republican. Even served on the Reagan admin. But the current group of Republicans are just too crazy even for him. January 6th. Most embarrassing shit I've ever seen in my life. Not me, but my aunt. She was mega all the way until the pandemic. She is a retired nurse and thinks Trump did a horrible job with COVID causing many deaths. My mom voted Trump the first time. She hated the Clintons and is a Republican military spouse. She became extremely anti-Trump after January 6th. She was losing faith in him leading up to that point, but that was definitely the biggest breaking point. She now argues with her friends who still support him. Gotta say that while this is an extremely small sample size, I'm so happy to see so many reformed Trump supporters. Gives me hope. I don't think I count, because I realized Trump was a bum before the election in 2016. But being a lifelong R and in AR state, I voted for Trump. I left the president blank in 2020. I will be voting against Trump even if it means voting for a D in 2024. Why? Trump promised to end the deficit. Instead he increased it in his first budget. Trump promised to limit government power. Instead he tried to increase the power of the president. Plus his moral failings. Then, after the election, he spread lies about democracy, and led the insurrection. Trump is a hardcore bad guy in the story of American democracy and American freedom. I am glad Trump happened. It forced me to examine the Republican Party. I was able to realize that there are good and moral and ethical Democrats. Just like there are a small number of Republicans who are good and ethical humans. I still support gun rights. But I want abortion to be safe, legal, and rare. The ramifications are a woman having to report a miscarriage when abortion isn't legal. That's not a small government limited government ideal. But now I can see that we need to worry about the environment, civil rights, and police have way too much power. If a patient dies on a doctor's table, with the doctor trying to save the patient, the doctor is investigated and can lose their license. A police officer kills a suspect through obvious error, and nothing happens. That can't all work like that if our democracy is going to work. Police in the US has far too much power. Trump had stacks of police guarding the White House during BLM in 2020. But none when the House and Senate were to ratify the 2020 election. That is an obvious statement on Trump's part. When Trump feared armed police were stacked deep. With democracy on the line, Trump limited the police. Cut the NPS budget. The land mass we inhabit is the only thing I'm actually proud of, so reducing the budget to protect our most amazing places was the final straw. Then COVID, then January 6th. I was more anti-Hillary than pro-Trump, but the whole drain the swamp thing resonated as I think Washington needs massive turnover, still do. But that was so divisive and really can't put a whole sentence together without being a jerk to some group or another. It turned my stomach. And then there's the whole COVID fiasco. Now literally everything out of his mouth is just so fucking out there. The rest of the world thinks we're all stupid. I shudder to think he even has a chance of holding that office again. Ukraine. As a veteran who rode submarines and spent 60% of my career patrolling off unnamed coastal waters. To see Russia as anything but a threat is to be naive. It's okay to take a business approach on the economy, but to show weakness on the political front is unforgivable. I voted for Trump for the 2016 election. I had just turned 18 that year. It was my first election. I didn't watch or read or research anything about politics. Why would I? I was just a teenager living the fun life. All I did was listen to what my family said. They complained about how the Democrats were ruining everything and how the Obama healthcare plan was horrible and migrants were awful and so on. My dad said it was time for a change and America needed to be run like a business, by a businessman, with the Americans as the shareholders. I assumed my family knew what was best because they sounded like they knew what they were talking about, and I listened to their advice. Seemed logical at the time. After watching everything that happened and actually learning about politics, I realized I had just been naive. I severely regret my decision and won't vote uninformed again. I voted for him in 2016 because he was Republican. He was my last choice on the Republican side because of his character and temperament. I just hoped his business knowledge would help. I was way off on that. I hated that it was between Trump and Hillary, but I regret every day not voting for Hillary. My only consolation is that I'm in a blue state and it wouldn't have mattered anyway. What really turned me against him and the entire Republican Party was how they spread lies and conspiracy theories to bolster their political position during COVID. They had no problem sacrificing lives for votes. I guess they didn't realize that once you're dead you can't vote. Once you start seeing some of their lies clearly, then they all become easy to spot. I probably wouldn't have voted for Trump in 2020 anyway, but after all that I have decided to vote down the line Democrat. 2020 was a big year for me though. I left a church that had really turned into a cult, and the same things I learned with that helped me see the lies and manipulation that the Republicans were using. My views on politics and religion really changed that year. I'm still a Christian and I still hold some conservative values, like small government, but I've had to re-evaluate much of what I've believed and known. In 2024 I'm voting for Biden, and it's not just because he's an alternative to Trump. He has genuinely been a good president and I see where his policies are getting us. The fact that he wants to help out average workers like me instead of just helping out the rich is a big one for me. There are many other reasons too, but this reply is already quite long. I've always been Republican, and the first election I felt like I was voting for the lesser of two evils. But then during his time in office he constantly made me regret my decision, so I didn't vote for him again. I was a member of the Republican Party since 1978. I changed to Democrat the day they put the big orange baby on the ticket 8 years ago. Evidence of his lack of control. He keeps defaming Carol even though he's been found guilty before. A person with no control over himself and what he says and does. Should not be in the presidency. Never liked him, but I was right-leaning for the longest time. Big into small government, free economy, fiscal responsibility, individual freedoms, all that jazz. I was a libertarian through and through, right down to voting Ron Paul. What changed me? I realized they didn't care about any of it. Fiscal responsibility really meant raise taxes on the middle class and cut the taxes of the rich, remove social programs so the military budget can go up. Individual freedom was code for being allowed to marry a 12-year-old and send kids back to the mines. Free markets meant remove minimum wage and pay people $1 a day so the profit sheet can soar. The more I looked into what was actually being done behind the buzzwords, the more I realized they weren't doing any of it. I still believe in fiscal responsibility, small government, free markets, but not what the GOP means by it. Because it's all code for give more to the rich and screw the poor. At least when the Dems spend a bunch of money we get some Social Security or Medicaid out of it. Even if I don't use them, it's better use than tax cuts for Elon and more drones to bomb kids in Yemen. I was a conservative voter until Trump ran. 2016 voted third party B/C. I didn't think either option was worth it. Since Trump, I've mostly voted blue. I do try to vote on a candidate by candidate basis, but too many Republicans are riding Trump's coattails now, so it's hard to find someone who's an individual on the right. I did appreciate Trump's anti-establishment bent. Had he actually drained the swamp of career politicians, I might have gotten on board. However, drain the swamp just turned into install my own butt-kissing lackeys. Trump amps up people's worst-base emotions. He's so good at it, he even does it to his opponents and Democrat voters. It's sad and destructive. I'd like some fresh faces in Washington. I wish we could elect a Mayor Pete-type candidate. Yes, I'm more left now. I was more anti-left than pro-Trump really. Almost voted for him but didn't. Russia placed bounties on US troops in Afghanistan and led an assault on US forces in Syria. I honestly thought Trump was going to go ham, but he just about sucked Putin's cock at every opportunity. For all the shit that Trump talks, I couldn't find a single fucking thing he's ever said about Putin in a negative way. You can find all sorts of fanboying of Trump to Putin, however. That kind of got me noticing, and the years ahead, his words and actions basically confirms it. He supports Russian interests above his own, which is pretty fucking telling for a guy like that.